What's up in War Eagle, everybody? It's your guy, Ike Jones. We're back talking a little Auburn women's basketball inside of Lobtown, a part of the War Report podcast network on the Auburn Express. And women's basketball is about to start the SEC season. Right now, this women's basketball team is trying to find a way to manufacture some offense. Auburn women are 9-4 on the season right now, going into an unbelievably tough SEC slate coming up here. And we're here to talk about it, break down all 16 games that are coming up for the women's basketball team. The biggest storyline right now is the health of some of their more crucial players. Um, Deanna Gaston has been a godsend for Auburn this year because she has been pretty much the rock on this team so far. She's been there, and gritty performance versus Norfolk State wasn't able to come up with the win there, but they came definitely close. But Gaston was a big part of that. But she was a little it was clear she was hobbled in that game. Coach Jay confirmed as much in the post game. Celia Sambane looks like she's maybe a little bit hobbled as well and has been playing through some injury stuff all season. But more notably, players like Talia Scott, who were supposed to be really injectors into an offense that was really not consistent last year. And she was going to be one of those people that was going to bring more of that consistency to this team, has not been able to play very many games. She didn't play the first few games of the season, came back from the injury, and then had a whole other situation happen with that wrist. So she's trying to work her way back and hopefully will be available for conference play. But then you lose a defensive stalwart for your team in Katie Duhan, who goes down to an ankle injury. And she seems as if she's going to be out for a while. Not sure if she's going to make it back for the beginning of conference play, but definitely going to be a serious one to monitor because her offensive game had come along. She was able to knock down open shots, and she's driving to the lane with more consistency and more ability to finish. But she was always going to be good for you on the defensive end in that rotation. So that is no small loss for the Auburn Tigers. And then just recently in the last couple of games, due to some illness stuff and just not feeling 100%, you don't have the services of Taylon Collins, who is one of the more consistent people for your team throughout the year. It had really been a Gaston and Collins duo on the interior that had helped Auburn to be able to knock off some teams there in the pre-SEC conference play in the non-con schedule. So hoping to get Taylon Collins back for play. So if you get Talia Scott and you get Taylon Collins back, you'll be in a better position. You did see Yakaya Milton play some minutes in these last couple of games to be able to give you some more length at the five and the ability to play a little bit more, play Gaston a little bit more at the four, which allows her to have a matchup problem for teams. So if you're going to have Yakaya at the five, and then you have, a little Akinbolawa behind her as the backup, or whichever rotation they want to put those two in, you play Gaston at the four, and then you can have a healthy Taylon Collins at the three, then you have a much better starting lineup. But you still have to figure out how you're going to get better and more consistent play out of your rotations there at the point guard position, because the point guard has been an issue for Auburn as far as not taking care of the basketball and not really giving you very much offensively. So Auburn's got to figure out a way to get better in that regard. Now, you love what you're getting right now from Soraya Daniels, the true freshman, at one of the off-guard positions, particularly as you have the injury right there to Katie Duhan, having her step up and be able to play some big minutes, be aggressive, get downhill, finishing in the lane through contact, and being able to knock down corner threes. That gives you a lot of hope that once you get Duhan back into that rotation, that now you have a solid rotation at that 2-3 spot where you can mix and match that in with Collins, and you'll have more ability to be able to have depth and play there with Sambane hopefully being healthy as well. But the point guard spot is the one that you're going to have to solidify. Even if you get Talia Scott back into this one, she's not a true point guard. I think she flourishes a little bit better when she's allowed to just be a scorer. Even though she can bring the ball up for you, she's not really the offense initiator that you really want. Shawnee, Marshawn Bostic really is that offense initiator. She's the one that can get downhill, and she likes to penetrate and dish off and get the assists, but she's got to work on finishing better in the lane. She needs to be able to add some ability to make mid-range shots because teams are just kind of allowing and sagging off of her, and she's got to find a way to stop turning the ball over in those pressure situations. So A lot to be desired right now from the point guard position and going into a very, very tough SEC schedule. We talked about the men's basketball being tough in the SEC. Women's basketball has traditionally been tough in the SEC. We look at the first 8 games here in the women's slate. There's only 16 in the conference schedule for the women, but we look at these first 8 games here. You started off versus Ole Miss, top 25 team out the gate. You're playing one of the best defensive teams in the country and a team that is looking probably at what you just did versus Norfolk State and saying, okay, we can come in and we can pressure this team and be able to get turnovers. So Auburn's going to have to be able to move and get their defensive pressure up and find ways to get live ball turnovers to make this game something that can be more interesting versus an Ole Miss team that's playing good this year but has had their own offensive struggles. Next up, you go on the road and you have to play LSU. LSU, even though they don't have Angel Reese right now, still has some dynamic players. Namely, you have the great presence there in the guard play that you have from Flau'jae Johnson, who is playing out of her mind this season, and Michaela Williams, who's doing a really good job. They have a team that is not just as good, but definitely deserves that top 10 ranking, and they're going to go out there and they're going to be a problem, particularly on the road at Baton Rouge. Next up, you've got Arkansas, and you definitely hope to have Talia Scott in this game because that's going to be a bit of a grudge match there. But you get that inside the confines of Neville Arena. Arkansas, a team that is not playing as well this season. So this is a winnable game for Auburn. Not that the first 2 aren't winnable, but this is really the first one on that you can look ahead and say, okay, we need to play our best to win this game, but this is a game that we should win. January 9th at home versus Arkansas is the first game that feels like a should win game. These other 2 are a maybe win if you play a really good game, but at best a push there, or a toss-up game versus Ole Miss. But Arkansas is a game where you're talented enough to be able to win that game, and you should expect to win. Kentucky, another team that's got a lot of length and ability there. The guard play has been fantastic for them. They have a lot of, really tall players on the inside that bother shots and can finish well with either hand. So you've got a tough one there on the road versus Kentucky. And then it doesn't get any easier because the next game you've got Johnny Harris's mentor coming to town with the Texas Longhorns, and a tenacious defense and some really good shooters on the outside, some very patient guard play. This is going to be a tough game inside of Neville Arena to get, but the number 5 Texas Longhorns coming in on January 6th. You play a Missouri team that's honestly reeling right now. They lost a lot of talent during the offseason in the transfer portal and graduation, and they're still trying to find their footing. This is a game that you can expect to win, but you need to be at full strength really to be able to pull off any of these games. And I haven't even mentioned it, but they're still hoping to potentially get Yu Ting, the Chinese transfer or the Chinese national player who came over and committed to Auburn, but has some eligibility things that they need to clear up before she's able to potentially play. Still hoping to get good word on that, and that would provide more scoring, which is the big thing that Auburn needs to be able to get some heady scoring ability to add to what they have from a defensive prowess standpoint. Next up, you have a tough Mississippi State team that is playing up and down this season, but definitely has a lot of talent so far, and a team that Auburn is going to have some trouble with on the road, if we're being honest. It's a team that plays well. They're 13-1 on the season. They have a lot of length and athleticism that is going to be tough for players like Deanna Gaston, who's been feasting on smaller competition for the vast majority of these games where she's been putting up these heavy points. But her ability to step out from the rim and shoot the mid-range is going to bode well for them. But this is a game where you're really hoping that you're going to get a full-strength Yakaya Milton, that you're going to have Taylor Collins back to be able to play some things defensively, right? So by that point in time, if you don't get them back by the first game, you hope to at least get them back by Mississippi State so that you're able to start to get into the teeth of this SEC play, and that'd be a good road win to be able to pick up there versus Mississippi State if you can clamp down defensively. Next game at home versus a Florida team that right now is again playing up and down this season. Again, a winnable game there at home inside of Neville Arena, but it's going to be a game that's going to come down to Auburn being able to lock down defensively. This Florida team can get out there and they can score some points this year. But they are a team that also is going to allow teams to score points. So if you can limit them defensively and you've got some sort of offensive power there with a Talia Scott, again with Taylor Collins hopefully coming back, and hopefully Ting being able to add on to that, then you may be able to get some of these games. Again, another winnable game there on the schedule in the middle of that conference slate. And you'd finish off, if we're just looking at these first 8 games of the season, what's a realistic number for Auburn to be able to pull off wins in? I think that you have 3 very winnable games, and you've got 2 more games that are push games, and I would call those toss games Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Again, I do believe that Mississippi State and Ole Miss are the more talented teams in those, but because of the Auburn defense and what they can do to maybe be able to bother some of the inabilities of Ole Miss offensively. And if you can muck that up and make it into an ugly game, then potentially with the scoring that you hopefully will have back by that time, you'll be able to do some things versus a very tough Ole Miss defense. If you're real, to me, it's going to come down to point guard play and how well do they get into their sets, because that's been another thing that's been frustrating watching the team, how long it takes them to get set into plays, and it actually plays into the defense's hands because you have less time to run your stuff. But if you can get into your stuff a little bit more effectively and your point guards can keep you out of those live ball turnovers near the midcourt, then you have a better chance of being able to go out there and put up points versus a team in Ole Miss, who's not the most prolific scoring team in the world. They're scoring better, I think, this year, but they still have their challenges in scoring the basketball this season. So Ole Miss and Mississippi State are the games where if you can split those games and get the games that you should get, which are Arkansas, Missouri, and Florida, then you can have 4 wins in the first half of that and looking decent going into the back half of your conference schedule. Appreciate everybody for jumping in here. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to get into the second half of the SEC season here for the Auburn women's basketball team right here inside of Lobtown on the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. When you look at the second half of this slate, it doesn't get any easier for Auburn. You come right out of the gate playing number 2 South Carolina in their house. And listen, I'm not going to hold you. I don't see a way that they win this game. South Carolina is such a juggernaut of the team that South Carolina offense is just dynamic. Malaysia Fulwali and, Katie and Kitts. And I mean, I could just name player after player for that talented South Carolina team that's going to come at you in waves. And they do play really good defense. They've got the outside shooting. This is a tough team to beat. And Auburn, unless Auburn has found a little bit more of an offensive identity by that point in time to add to their defensive pressure, then you can't win a game in South Carolina. Again, at home, I'd give you a little bit more of a chance. At South Carolina, it feels a little bit more difficult to make happen. Next game up is against Texas A&M. You get them back at home. And Texas A&M, again, is a team that's struggling for their identity this season. They've been off and on. Definitely a talented team. And they've got plenty of pieces that will allow them to play well, but Auburn needs to be able to play that lockdown defense and really take away some of the stuff Texas A&M wants to do, because defensively Texas A&M hasn't been as good as I think that they would like to be so far this year. So Texas A&M, another winnable game at home for Auburn. So hopefully Auburn can steal one there. Next up, that Oklahoma team, again, another long and talented team on the interior that could just go out there and really cause havoc, particularly against some of the post players for Auburn. This is a game where you're going to need to knock down a lot of mid-range shots and be able to get some of that three-point ability. Hopefully, again, Talia Scott's back in there, and you can get Audia Young into the rotation as Oklahoma's going to look to kind of get into some of that zone pressure that they like to apply, and you can force them out of that zone by shooting from the outside. And Auburn doesn't have a lot of outside shooters, but they have enough that if they post up around that exterior and they're doing a good job of taking good shots, Celia's come a long way in her ability to knock down open threes. Again, I talked about Audia Young. Talia Scott, if she's healthy, going to be able to do that. Soraya Daniels looking good, shooting that corner three for Auburn. And by this point in time, hopefully you do have Katie Duhan to add back into that mix, and she can knock down some external shots. And we've seen Gaston be able to step away from the basket and shoot even the three-point shot that she hit for the win there when they were down in the Virgin Islands. So you've got some people who can shoot, and this is a game that you're going to need to be able to do that on the road versus Oklahoma, a tough matchup. Next up, you got another top 25 team there inside the SEC with Tennessee. Again, just an uber talented team that's got a lot to throw at you out there. This is going to be a game where you need your offense to step up because Tennessee's going to come at you in waves there. So, going to be a tough game on the road in Knoxville. And Auburn, this is a game where, we'll talk about predictions of what could be and all that in just a minute. But this is a game where Auburn, I can see some opportunities for Auburn to win this one, but, it's not one that I would call a ready win. Next up, you have the Vanderbilt Commodores, and this is another game. This is a game like it's not last year's team and it's not last year's blah, blah, get all of that. But this is a game that Auburn let slip away from them last year that they absolutely should have won at Vandy. They get Vandy at home this season, and this is a game I'm going to say Auburn should win again this year. Again, it's going to come down to taking care of the basketball. That's been an Achilles heel for them, and it definitely was a problem for them versus Vanderbilt late game last year. Being able to close out these games without the crucial turnovers is going to be important, and that's been an issue for Auburn in some of their losses this season. It's just the late game turnovers, the inability to hit late game free throws. They need to be able to do those things more consistently and provide some help for Deanna Gaston so she doesn't have to shoulder a lot of the load and show some more patience offensively to get more people involved in all of that. Next up, you're going to go on the road to Tuscaloosa versus a very tough offensive-minded Bama team. And again, it's going to come down to the Auburn defense in this one because Bama can score, and they can score in waves. You need to be able to take care of the basketball and play good defense to be able to walk out of Tuscaloosa with a win. You almost did it last year, but again, late game, the turnovers cost you in that game versus Alabama. This Alabama team is composed very similarly to last year's team that made the run in the tournament last year. So you can go out there and you can play with this team, but you have to be able to take care of the basketball better, particularly late game down the stretch. You go on the road to Georgia versus this next game, and this should be a game even on the road that Auburn should be able to win. They should be able to go on the road there in Athens and get a dub versus the Georgia Bulldogs. Late game, late in the season, you don't know how these two teams will progress both physically and how they gel as a team. But if Auburn gets better and even if Georgia improves, this Auburn team is talented enough to be able to match up with Georgia. They should be able to get the win. Last game of the season is going to be versus Mississippi State, the rematch. And hopefully this is a revenge game for Mississippi State, and they're trying to come inside of Neville Arena this time and get the win. And hopefully Auburn can get the season sweep here being inside of Neville Arena. This is a team, again, Mississippi State, long physical team that is going to take a lot of effort on the defensive end to just, number one, secure the backboard. I haven't talked about this a lot, but the offensive rebounding issues or the inability to close out possessions with a defensive rebound that happens versus Norfolk State, this is the kind of game that will rear its head if you're not in there and being focused. Again, Auburn was undermanned, and a lot of the people who they would count on to be able to get some of those crucial boards weren't available during that game. Hopefully they will be back for this game versus Mississippi State by this time, and you're getting healthy and making a run to potentially get yourself into the tournament. But it is a tough slate to be able to get there. I said that Auburn maybe could split their first half of the season in the SEC schedule going 4-4. And I think you're going to need to get 8 wins to be able to get into the tournament in the SEC, having lost 4 games already this season. And the question is, do I see another 4 wins on this? I think you can get Texas A&M. I think you can get Vanderbilt, and I think you can get Georgia. Now, the question is, are you going to be able to get Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Tennessee, or Alabama out of those? Because I'm sorry, I'm just not chalking up even a potential win versus South Carolina. I think that those probable wins are going to come either versus Tennessee or versus Alabama. So if you can win the ones that you should be able to compete and win in, a la Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Georgia, then you can maybe get Mississippi State, Tennessee, or Bama. I do think that Oklahoma right now might be a little bit too much on the interior for Auburn. So I think that if offensively Auburn can put it together, they can get to 9 wins. And I know I said 4-4 in the first half, potentially 4-4 in the second half, but I think 9 wins is a good ceiling right now for how this team is playing right now. And again, a lot of this has to do with the health of the team. If the team is healthy and they're playing a little, they just really haven't had time to play together very much. Talia Scott, who was a big portion of their ability to shoot from the outside, hasn't played very much basketball with this team, even in the preseason. Yakaya Milton was out for a lot during the preseason, hadn't had a lot of opportunities to go out there and really play with the team, and they haven't figured each other out, particularly on the offensive end. You haven't had an opportunity opportunity to have Katie Duhan out there for a lot. She was often injured during the offseason. And when she got back, she had another ankle injury. So a lot of the pieces that are going to be important for this team have been out in and out of the lineup. If you can get them back and get them healthy, then yes, 9, maybe even 10 wins in a very tough slate, not impossible. It's a reach. It's a stretch. I think the more conservative one and one that will put you on the bubble again for this season is going to be 6 wins. I think 6 wins is a very realistic number for this team to be able to achieve. 6 to 10 wins is where the range is I feel like this team has right now in the SEC. And again, a lot of that is pending having some of those pieces that you're missing right now coming back. If you get all of them back, then I feel more comfortable going to a 10-win side of that. But it's going to be tough, and it's going to start at home versus a tough Ole Miss team that's going to come in and play really good defense, and you need to be able to particularly stretch them from the outside. Hopefully, they're going to get Talia Scott back in that game, and maybe they'll have some other potential there with Yu-Ting. Don't know what happens there, but if she comes back and she can stretch the floor a little bit more for you, that provides more room for Deanna Gaston to go to work down low. And then your Auburn team is going to be off to the races. But that's it. What I want to hear from you is the fans out there of SEC women's basketball. What do you feel like the ceiling/floor is for Auburn women's basketball during this SEC slate? Definitely want to hear that from you. Like the video before you get out of here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share this great content. We'll be back at you reacting to these games as they happen during the season. But until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.